Do you want to?
No amplification, so people hear only through the headset.
Okay. But not when I'm speaking, apparently. Not when I'm speaking. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to make a start. If you can't hear me, there are headsets around, so it's all being mic'd through the headsets if you need them. And welcome to everyone who is watching online. So my name is Mark Watts. I am the Executive Director of C40 Cities, and this is a Cities Race to Zero event, driving ambitious climate action to halve emissions by 2030 and delivering a green and just recovery from the COVID pandemic. So this, as you can see, this is a session hosted by C40 on behalf of the Cities Race to Zero. And I'd like to just note and thank our partner organizations, CDP, the Global Covenant of Mayors, UCLG, WWF, the World Resources Institute, and finally, last but not least, ICLEI, who we also have to thank for facilitating this great multi-level climate action pavilion, which is the home of cities here in the Blue Zone. So I guess the backdrop for this session, earlier this week on Monday at the World Leaders Summit, our C40 chair, Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, announced that over 1,000 cities, I think it's 1,049 cities, have now committed to deliver their fair share of halving global emissions by 2030 through the Cities Race to Zero campaign, which we think represents the most aggressive set of commitments by any group of governments brought here to COP26. And it also sets a bar for, in the commitments they've made for what needs to be delivered next year, right away, immediate action in 2022 to make that target a reality. So for the two panel sessions today, we're going to celebrate that achievement, but we're going to discuss how the cities, the 1,049 cities that have made those commitments, are going to be able to deliver on that action. And so the mayors joining us today are going to be sharing examples of what they're doing in their own cities, the really transformative, immediate action that they are delivering to reduce emissions and reduce inequality, to improve equity within their cities. And then we're going to be also welcoming some special guests, Minister, former COP President, and representatives from the finance sector who are going to be discussing with our city leaders, and particularly in the second panel, the challenges and opportunities for funding those climate plans. So first, I am delighted to call up to our first panel. First, Mayor Colau, the Mayor of Barcelona, if you'd like to take your seat, please, Mayor. And then, indeed, a round of applause. And then Mayor Aki Sawyer, the Mayor of Freetown. And then we are absolutely delighted to have the Minister of Environment for Chile and President of COP25, Carolina Schmidt. Please take your seat and a huge round of applause. And then you'll see there's an empty seat. At some point in a few minutes' time, Mayor Khan, the Mayor of London, and also the newly elected chair of C40 will be joining us. But to get proceedings underway, I am now going to hand over to my colleague, David Miller, who is C40's Managing Director of International Diplomacy, but also a former C40 chair, former Mayor of Toronto. David, over to you, and I shall hand the mic.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you to the mayors and Carolina for being here today, and thank you all for attending. It's an incredible pleasure for me to be amongst these mayors and to hear them speak of how they're taking ambitious and equitable climate action to reduce emissions and inequalities in each of their cities, because these mayors are really truly leading a global Green New Deal. And today we're here to celebrate a special part of this global Green New Deal, which is the Cities Race to Zero, as Mark mentioned, a campaign that we launched a year ago in partnership with the other city organizations and networks as a key city component of the UN Race to Zero campaign. The goal of Cities Race to Zero is to rally climate leadership and provide a formal mechanism for cities and non-state actors to set official and ambitious climate targets alongside national governments. Since its launch in November 2020, Cities Race to Zero has amassed a coalition of the 1,049 cities and growing that Mark mentioned across 76 countries, directly representing over 722 million people in the heart of regions of nearly 1 billion. These cities are committed to reaching near zero emissions by 2050 and also taking the necessary actions to deal with their fair share of having global emissions by 2030, which we must do if we're to be on a path to 1.5 degrees. This is the biggest group of governments to be committed to 1.5 degrees, and their collective action has the potential to reduce global emissions by at least 14 gigatons by 2030, which is about the equivalent of all the emissions of the 5th largest country in the world. Incredibly important and significant. Signatory cities have pledged to immediately deliver at least one inclusive and equitable climate action, to report progress annually. And this element of equity is a distinctive feature of the Cities Race to Zero compared to other programs. To deliver this, cities and local governments have signed up to at least one, and in most cases, several concrete actions in sectors with significant contributions to the climate crisis. As you can see here, over 3,570 commitments have been made, including 222 cities have committed to divest from fossil fuels and invest in a more sustainable future. 470 have committed to create sustainable food systems, 287 to reduce air pollution, 407 to creating a more inclusive society, 347 green and healthy streets, 415 advancing towards zero waste, over 500 to building zero carbon buildings, nearly 600 towards resilient and sustainable energy systems, and 328 have committed to move towards resilient and sustainable construction systems. Those were a lot of numbers, but they really show the depth of the movement of this cities movement, which is about action. And the Cities Race to Zero is an accelerator of ambitious and innovative climate action on the ground. So this panel is now going to discuss some great examples of these groundbreaking city climate actions. So I'd first like to turn to Ada Colau, the mayor of the great city of Barcelona, who will speak in Spanish with interpretation to English. So everyone, please ensure your headset is on. That will facilitate your interpretation. Ignore the fact that I did not put my headset on. I will. Mayor Colau, you've been an incredible leader in building climate plans in an equitable way and building inclusive action in a climate-friendly way. The floor is yours, and we look forward to your comments. Oh.
Thank you. Sorry. It's okay. Muy bien, pues es un placer estar aquí en este panel también acompañada. Y muy breve, porque nos han pedido que seamos breves, ¿no? Yo creo que esta COP26 tiene dos grandes retos, ¿no? No solo el primer reto que todos sabemos y compartimos, que es reducir las emisiones en los próximos años de manera decidida y valiente y no postergar más la acción contra el cambio climático, sino para el 2030 reducir la mitad de las emisiones. Este es un objetivo ambicioso pero realizable y hay que apoyarlo. Pero hay un segundo objetivo fundamental que creo que desde C40 estamos planteando con mucha fuerza, que es el de la justicia climática. Hay que hacer la transición, pero hay que hacerla con justicia social. Sería inaceptable que estos cambios que hay que hacer aumentaran la desigualdad en el planeta, que ya es muy desigual. Y al contrario, hay que convertir la lucha contra el cambio climático en una gran oportunidad para reducir la desigualdad en el planeta, y es perfectamente posible. Y eso es lo que intentamos hacer desde muchas ciudades, desde nuestra acción cotidiana. Y para ser breve les voy a poner dos ejemplos de lo que estamos haciendo en Barcelona. En primer lugar, una estrategia de ciudad, de modelo de ciudad, que es la superilla, Superblocks, que lo que pretende es transformar el conjunto de la ciudad para aumentar las vías verdes, reducir los coches, reducir la contaminación, poner las personas en el centro, hacer de la ciudad un lugar más verde, más saludable, mejor para vivir y para trabajar y para hacer vida en comunidad, reforzando el transporte público, reforzando la bicicleta, y todo eso además tiene buenos efectos económicos porque ya hemos comprobado que eso refuerza el comercio local y la economía local y por lo tanto también es una oportunidad económica. Y cuando hablo de que en esto incorporamos la justicia social, es que Barcelona, al mismo tiempo que tiene este ambicioso plan de transformación urbana, también somos la capital de todo nuestro país, de España, la capital con más inversión social por habitante, porque entendemos que esta transformación hay que hacerla sin dejar a nadie atrás. Y eso no quiere decir solo hacer más política social, sino también, por ejemplo, que toda la transformación urbana priorice como objetivo no solo reducir la contaminación, sino también aumentar la vivienda social. Y a día de hoy, Barcelona también tiene el orgullo de poder decir que es la ciudad de toda España que más vivienda pública de alquiler social está realizando para que los vecinos no tengan que dejar la ciudad a causa de la subida de los precios cuando la ciudad mejora con la transformación urbana, ¿no? Por lo tanto, sería un ejemplo de cómo acompañamos la transición climática, la transformación urbana de política social y de justicia social. Un segundo ejemplo es una cuestión central en la lucha contra el cambio climático, donde las ciudades tenemos un papel totalmente prominente, que es la cuestión de la energía, ¿no? La energía esencial para la vida y para el funcionamiento de nuestras ciudades actualmente está en manos de grandes empresas. En el caso de España, con unos precios de los más caros de Europa, eso genera pobreza energética en miles y miles de familias que no pueden pagarse la calefacción, que no pueden acceder a un derecho fundamental como es la energía, pero además con un modelo que sigue apostando mayoritariamente por la energía fósil y no por las renovables. Bueno, pues en Barcelona hemos creado una compañía municipal que no teníamos competencias porque la política energética es competencia del Estado, pero esa emergencia está pasando en nuestra ciudad y por lo tanto hemos puesto creatividad, innovación, hemos creado una empresa pública que no puede ser productora de energía, pero sí comercializa energía solo 100% renovable. Y a día de hoy, las luces de nuestra ciudad se ilumina solo con energía renovable. Pero no solo eso, sino que también hemos hecho una política contra la pobreza energética. Hemos reducido la factura de la luz del conjunto de la ciudad y también hemos evitado miles de cortes a miles de familias donde las grandes empresas con precios inasequibles iban a cortar la luz y hemos hecho mediación con las empresas para evitar los cortes de luz. Ese sería otro ejemplo de impulso de las renovables, pero siempre priorizando que las familias más vulnerables no se queden sin acceso a un derecho básico como es la energía. Con eso quiero dar un mensaje sobre todo positivo y optimista. Si ciudades que tenemos menos competencias y menos recursos que los estados podemos hacer estas transformaciones ambiciosas, valientes, innovadoras y creativas, se puede hacer mucho más. Y ese creo que es el espíritu que tenemos que contagiar a esta cumbre, ¿no? Desde las ciudades a la COP26. Y en ese sentido, con esto ya quiero terminar. Quiero agradecer muchísimo a C40, a mis compañeras alcaldesas y alcaldes, a nuestro querido alcalde Sadiq Khan y presidente de C40, que ahora se incorpora. Gracias, Sadiq. Pues quisiera agradecer a Sadiq Khan, a la alcaldesa de Freetown, a la alcaldesa Hidalgo, que nos tenía que acompañar hoy aquí, y a tantos alcaldes y alcaldesas que gracias a C40 estos días hemos compartido problemas, pero sobre todo soluciones. Creo que todos nos hemos emocionado viendo que estamos avanzando, que estamos logrando hacer grandes cosas desde la pequeña acción cotidiana de la ciudad. Hemos compartido nuestros deseos, nuestras ambiciones y esto es imparable, esto no tiene marcha atrás. Las ciudades están siendo innovadoras, valientes y vamos a proteger a nuestra ciudadanía y vamos a hacer de nuestras ciudades un espacio de vida. Y esto, como digo, no tiene marcha atrás. Entonces quiero contagiar ese espíritu optimista desde las ciudades a los estados en la COP26, que sepan que sí se puede, si se quiere, Todos sabemos que una de las noticias de esta COP26 es que algunos estados, algunos países muy importantes y también responsables de gran parte de las emisiones no están participando, pero eso no puede ser excusa, porque si el resto de naciones, si el resto de países se unen y cooperan y realmente empiezan a dar pasos adelante, seguro que esos países que hoy no están participando en la COP26 acabarán participando de esos grandes consensos. Por lo tanto, necesitamos más que nunca cooperación, liderazgo, unidad, innovación y claro que se puede. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos.
Mayor Kalau is an incredible example of superb climate action. And I personally love the fact that you're able to find a way to build affordable housing that is also very energy efficient because of city actions. I'd like to turn, before we get to our two fellow mayors, I'd like to turn to Carolina Schmidt for a moment. And first of all, as the president of COP25, I want to thank you so much for joining us today here in the panel. We're keen to engage the COP presidencies in this discussion about cities and about how cities ensure that the planet remains a healthy and possible place to live. So I was wondering, based on what you've heard from Mayor Kalau and your knowledge of the city's race to zero and these bold actions that cities have committed to, can you comment on your view as the president of COP25, if this action can drive good outcomes in the intergovernmental discussion on climate change, how cities can intervene, and how we can ensure that both cities and national governments achieve our collective goal of 1.5 degrees? In 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, then I will go in Spanish, David, so I can be faster then, okay? Okay, no, primero un gusto gigante de estar en este panel con alcaldesa, ¿verdad? Alcalde, porque la verdadera acción climática parte desde el territorio, desde abajo hacia arriba. Y yo quiero contarles solo 2 historias porque creo que están importantes. Cuando nos tocó asumir la presidencia de la COP25, estábamos con Estados Unidos, que se había anunciado su salida del Acuerdo de París, el año, ¿verdad?, 2019. Y uno de los temas es cómo hacemos finalmente para avanzar en un problema global cuando tenemos uno de los grandes emisores restándose justamente de esto. No vamos a tener cómo. Y lo que concluimos era que la única manera de hacerlo era de que la acción tenía que venir de abajo hacia arriba y no solo de arriba hacia abajo. Y ahí las ciudades y los gobiernos locales adquirieron una importancia muy relevante junto con los actores no estatales. Y es por eso que el lema de la acción de la COP25 fue "Es tiempo de actuar", y el gran foco estuvo de cómo integrábamos a los actores no estatales en un proceso que estaba básicamente manejado por las partes, los estados. Y en eso relevar el tremendo rol que tuvieron los champions. Nosotros en la COP25 renovamos el rol de los champions, que son los que generan, ¿verdad?, la movilización de los actores no estatales, con un foco de integrarlo conjuntamente a la Alianza de Ambición Climática por la Carbono Neutralidad. Y en ese sentido ver quién eran los actores no estatales que podían generar cambios reales para lograr la carbono neutralidad del planeta a más tardar el 2050. Y ahí se dijeron los principales, los gobiernos locales, ¿verdad? Todo lo que es el mundo del sector privado, el mundo financiero y el mundo de la academia. Todos con un foco science-based targets, que no fuera decisiones que cada uno hiciera lo que quisiera, sino que con un foco muy claro, ¿verdad?, de el compromiso con la carbono neutralidad y acciones concretas basadas en la ciencia. Y así, la campaña Race to Zero, que nace ahí con el champion de la COP25 y el champion de la COP26, Gonzalo y Nigel, tienen ese foco. Es en ese trabajo que nosotros cómo se integra esto con el tema general del proceso, cómo se institucionaliza esto dentro del proceso de la COP, es justamente con esta campaña dentro del proceso, ¿verdad?, de lo que es el rol de los champions, pero sobre todo, y como muy bien señaló el secretario general, en su discurso de, digamos, de apertura, es decir, cómo nosotros eso construimos confianza en un sistema de que esto no es un greenwashing ni un politics, digamos, publicidad política, digamos, sino que son efectivamente compromisos creíbles, medibles y verificables. Y yo creo que ahí está el tremendo desafío, sobre todo en un proceso que lo que necesita hoy día, más que nunca, es generar confianza en la ciudadanía de que sí somos capaces de generar los cambios que necesitamos a la velocidad que lo necesitamos, porque no nos sirve el compromiso con el 2050 si no somos capaces de reducir en esta década nuestro pic de emisiones, iniciar claramente el descenso de las emisiones. Y que yo creo que los desafíos, yo decir desde el punto de vista central, ¿cuál es el mayor desafío hoy día? Todas las NDC, las contribuciones nacionalmente determinadas con los compromisos climáticos de los países, están hechos de arriba hacia abajo. Entonces hay un compromiso de presupuesto de emisiones, ¿verdad? Sabemos cuáles son las emisiones globales máximas que podemos hacer, sabemos cuánto cada país tiene que reducir esas emisiones, que son ¿verdad? Los compromisos de los países, pero ¿cómo hacemos que eso se baje al territorio? Ese es el tremendo desafío, porque no se construye de verdad la acción climática. A diferencia de la planificación climática, se construye de arriba para abajo. La acción climática se construye de abajo hacia arriba. Y ahí el rol principal justamente los tienen los gobiernos locales y los medios, pero necesitan herramientas para poder hacerlo. Y eso es lo que nosotros, ¿verdad?, hemos visto. ¿Cuáles son esas herramientas? Y aquí un tema muy importante, las estrategias climáticas de largo plazo, que es una de las herramientas que establece el Acuerdo de París para ver los planes de acción, no solamente tienen que ser construidas con los alcaldes para la integración de las herramientas, con los gobiernos locales, sino que tener instrumentos vinculantes para que estos dos mundos, ¿verdad?, coordinen, y los recursos financieros necesarios para la transformación de los distintos sectores sean coordinados con las transformaciones sectoriales que tiene transporte, que tiene vivienda, las políticas, ¿verdad?, nacionales. Y decir dos temáticas que quizás en estos 2 minutos pueden hacer: la relevancia de las soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Yo quiero destacarlo porque muchas veces nos enfocamos mucho en temáticas, cambio de las energías, etcétera, pero señalar que el 55% de la reducción de emisiones que necesitamos para ser carbono neutral vienen del cambio a las energías limpias, pero el otro 45% viene del cambio en la forma en que nosotros vivimos diariamente, el cambio en la forma en que efectivamente nos transportamos, el cambio en la forma en que nosotros gestionamos la basura, en forma en que nosotros consumimos, vivimos, comemos. Y en ese sentido, si nosotros ponemos el foco de ese 45%, tiene mayoritariamente, depende de los gobiernos locales. Son los gobiernos locales los que hacen toda la gestión de los residuos, son los gobiernos locales los que finalmente organizan, ¿verdad?, el espacio dentro de la ciudad para generar un sistema de transporte que permita la movilidad, como muy bien decía la alcaldesa Norcolau, en el tema de la bicicleta, de los transportes limpios. Y son los alcaldes también los que pueden generar un cambio en las áreas verdes y la protección e incremento de las áreas verdes, que no solamente permiten, ¿verdad?, mitigar fuertemente el cambio climático y adaptarse a él, sino que de manera muy relevante generar mejoras en las condiciones de vida y de equidad de la población en las ciudades. Los barrios más acomodados de la ciudad son los que tienen más áreas verdes. Los barrios más vulnerables de las ciudades son los que generalmente conviven con la basura, con la falta de espacios verdes, con los sistemas de transporte de difícil acceso, etcétera. Entonces, esta transformación que nosotros necesitamos hacer para enfrentar el cambio climático es una tremenda oportunidad para cambiar justamente esa desigualdad y generar mejores condiciones de vida para todos. Y yo creo que el gran rol está en la articulación de las herramientas de los gobiernos locales con los planes nacionales, y la verdadera diferencia se hace desde el territorio, y por eso la importancia de que no solamente formen parte de la Alianza Ambición Climática, el Race to Zero, sino que el trabajo coordinado entre los gobiernos locales y nacionales es lo que permite avanzar con la velocidad que necesitamos. Felicitaciones a todos los que forman parte, yo creo que tenemos un gran desafío por delante.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I was struck by the way you described two worlds, the world of national making pledges and the world of local doing action, and how the city's race to zero can bring them together. I was really struck by that. Very helpful. I'd like to turn now to Mayor Aki Sawyer of Freetown, who I think has a very important perspective in the challenges faced by global cities, because the challenges are different in different places, similar of nature, but different way of expressing it. And we've seen an acceleration, for example, of urban sprawl and in many cities, car-oriented development resulting in long commutes, poor air quality, a lack of amenities in many neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods outside cities. And of course, it's particularly true in African cities, which now have the fastest urbanization rate in the world and still suffer from a very high level of informality. And Mayor Aki Sawyer, can you give some examples of the strategies that you're experimenting with in Freetown to address these challenges of informality, sprawl, reduce carbon emissions, and tackle the pandemic all at the same time, which sounds like a massive task, but if anyone can do it, it's Mayor Yvonne Aki Sawyer. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thanks, David. Yeah. Yes, okay. So I think Mark's opening remarks said that we were here to celebrate signing, getting the signatures and presenting to COP26, the 1,049 signatures for net zero at city level. And I want to take a moment to just acknowledge that again and say how amazing it is that this is being driven, this sort of action is being driven from cities. We're taking the lead. Having said that, as you've highlighted, David, that means different things for different cities. But one of the things that's we've got to make sure we don't do is to pull back, because some situations feel a bit more messy than others. So there's clearly a difference in what is possible when you have the function of urban management, a function which you'd expect to be a given for all city mayors, but which actually isn't the case. So in some situations, it's a more difficult ask of the local authority to take the structural changes, make those policy decisions around transportation, around land use planning, zoning, that are key aspects of any toolkit that you'd want to use for climate intervention. That notwithstanding, we are moving forward because we have to. As Ada said, we're at a point where you could be pessimistic, but we don't have the luxury of doing that. We've got to keep on moving forward. And in my city, giving an example of a city from the global south, where these functions, most of the very, very important tools are not present. What we have been able to do is to nevertheless tackle and make our contribution to ensuring that we're getting to net zero. And I will say again, if you are coming from a continent where 90% of urbanization is expected to happen on that continent, but at the same time, by 2050, but at the same time, we are accounting for 0.55% of emissions. So we know that that growth is not a growth that is necessarily going to lead to more emissions. However, what it will do, two things. One, the impact that we're already seeing of climate change will continue, but two, it will be exacerbated by that growth, which has the challenges of lack of development control. What have we done? I'm going to mention three very quickly. Freetown, the tree town, planting 1 million trees within the city. That serves to cool. Extreme heat is a problem which is getting worse and worse. It serves as an adaptation method because it prevents landslides, mudslides, flooding, but it also, very importantly, supports the improvement of water shortages that are a feature of this new climate environment. Methane has had a lot of coverage this week, and rightly so. And most of that methane is coming from farms, from farming. But on our continent, the biggest emitter, biggest source of methane is from sanitation. open dumping. And we are moving towards changing that, bringing in systems which will not only provide jobs, as is the case with Freetown, the Tree Town, it's creating hundreds of jobs. And similarly, sanitation, we've really made it a focus, and it's created already 2,000 jobs. But going beyond that, sanitary landfill is going to be part of that. Transportation accounts for 28% of our emissions, and we're introducing a cable car system, which will introduce for the first time mass transit, but green mass transit, taking away from the roads our heavy diesel guzzling, low occupancy vehicles, which not only give our minuscule contribution to greenhouse gases, but also very significantly contribute to poor air quality. And finally, I just want to say that green spaces are making life better is another aspect. It's not just about, like I said, making sure that our minuscule contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is reduced, but it's also improving quality of life. So I'll end by saying that there's one major challenge in all of this, and that's finance. We do not have the access to finance. And there's been a lot said over the last couple of days about that. And I want to just use an analogy. When we talk about the global south being low emitters, but being disproportionately affected by the real, very real impacts of climate change. And I just want to say, Sadiq, if you hit my car, if we're on the road together, and we had an accident and you were responsible for damaging my car, who should pay for my car to be repaired? It's you. And that's what's going on now. So this is not a charity cry. This is not a call to say, oh, this, please come help. No, you are responsible for the damage that's being done. And therefore, you must be responsible to pay. One of the challenges that we have with this global system, very different to the rigors of C40. When you join C40, you have commitments that you make. If you fail to meet those commitments, you leave C40. Unfortunately, here at COP, you make your nationally determined contribution pledges. If you fail to meet them, meh, as my daughter would say. But I think this is something that as cities, we are going to continue to make a noise about, because we are signing those pledges. We're not going to stop at 1,049 cities. We're going to keep driving forward with these commitments. But ultimately, we need the nation states to also play their parts. And we need the private sector to come on board beyond the pledges to real commitments. Thank you.
Just before I turn to Mayor Khan, Carolina Schmidt has another engagement. I do want to thank her for representing the presidency here today. Thank you so much. Mayor Aki-Sawyer, in addition to your tremendous leadership as mayor, you'd make a great moderator, because you've given the perfect segue to my question for Mayor Khan, who is not only the great mayor of London, England, but is also the chair-elect of C40. Mayor, I think it's known around the world, your efforts on air quality with the ultra-low emission zone, but perhaps a little bit less known what London is doing on the area of finance, which Mayor Aki-Sawyer referred to. I know, for example, in the latest Global Green Finance Index, London is #1 in the world. And my question for you, Mayor, is what can cities do to advance green finance? How are you doing that as the world's capital of green finance? And how does your policy and action on divestment of London's investments from fossil fuels play into this? And I'll hand over the mic. I look forward to your comments.
Thanks, David. I've got to make a confession, which is I'm a huge fan of Ada, the mayor of Barcelona, and of Yvonne, the mayor of Freetown. And being on the stage with Ada and Yvonne, I'm a football fan. It's like playing football with Mo Salah and Sadio Mane and Abi Firmino. So it's great to be up front, trying to score some goals for C40 and saving our planet. And David, before I answer your question in substance, somebody once said, if the 19th century was famous for empires and the 20th century famous for nation states, the 21st century is about cities and mayors. And proof of that is in the work of C40 and the Race to Zero. And you've heard some of the inspirational stories from Ada and Yvonne exemplifying why we are this century's stars. Look, the issue that both Ada and Yvonne raised, one of the things that is the elephant in the room is how we finance the transition to zero. As Yvonne said, it's got to be a just transition. What a just transition means is the victim of the car accident shouldn't pay for the medical treatment he or she suffers, right? That's what a just transition means. It should be the person responsible who has the wealth and the broader shoulders and who's actually benefited from causing the accident should pay for the cost of the healthcare of the person injured. So how do we fund some of these projects? Well, what we don't want is money's being raised by perpetuating mistakes made, more accidents, fossil fuels. And that's why it's important you refer to divestment. So we in London, with another C40 partner, New York, we began a project in New York and London around divest and invest because we hold lots of pension funds, tens of millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds. And what New York and London decided was to divest our pensions from fossil fuels and invest our pensions in the good stuff. And we've got other cities involved. There are now 18 cities from C40 involved, responsible for more than $400 billion, right? And we're divesting from the bad stuff. And actually, it's not just morally the right thing to do. It makes huge economic sense. How is it profitable to invest in fossil fuels? It doesn't make sense. And so we want London to be the global financial center for not just finance, but green finance. As you said, we've been ranked independently as number one. And we're trying to encourage people to invest in some of our projects. So how do you electrify our buses? How do you pay for electrifying our taxis? How do you pay for the buildings that are built to be insulated, to have double glazing window, to have solar panels, to rely upon renewable energies? And we think this is an example of the green agenda and the importance of making profits coming together. And the Chancellor of our country today announced a scheme where there'll be transparency. So companies will be required to set out how green they are. And we hope that the shareholders, but also customers, reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. And we use some of the wealth in the global north to help the global south. One of the first things I did as the new chair of C40 is to announce that in our first budget as C40, at least 2/3 will be spent on the global south. That's the person responsible for the accident paying their fair share towards the person injured. And can I just end by saying how important this network is? This network of almost 100 cities represents more than 700 million people across the globe. We represent more than a quarter of the global wealth generated. But Yvonne's right. The population of the world is going towards cities. Roughly more than 50% of the world's population lives now in cities. Over the course of the next couple of decades, it'll be more than 2/3. And the vast majority of urbanization in the global south. So we've got to make sure we support our brothers and sisters, not just in Freetown, but across the global south.
Fantastic, Mayor. And you also made a perfect segue because our next panel is on finance. I would like to thank the great Mayor Kalau, the great Mayor Aki Sawyer, and the great Mayor Khan for their work and for their contributions today. Can we just acknowledge their presentations again? And pass the microphone to the Executive Director of C40, Mr. Mark Watts, for the next panel on finance.
Great. Thank you, David. Thank you for a great panel. So indeed, we are going to move seamlessly on. That was the perfect segue. We are now focusing on the finance needed to deliver on those 1,049 cities and their Race to Zero commitments. So if I could, as we're getting the change over here, if I could invite onto the stage first, please, His Excellency Secretary General Abdullah Al Basti of Dubai. Secretary General, if you could take to the stage, please, and a round of applause. And then from across the world, the Mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego, please take the stage and a round of applause, please. And then we're really delighted to welcome the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Odile Renaud-Bassot, to the stage, please. Oh, she's on it. Okay, she's not here. I've got my introductions in too early. And then finally, in that case, Sergio Guzmão Suadowski, the President of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais in Brazil. And to chair this session, I am delighted to welcome a relatively new colleague at C40, our Principal Finance Advisor, Josue Tanaka, who also, of course, very recently a Managing Director at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Josue.
Thank you very much, Mark. Welcome to the panel. Welcome to all of you. And so you had a lot of numbers in the previous session, but I think they're worth repeating. 1,049 cities, almost 750 million people. And if we look to 2050, probably way beyond 1 billion in population just for those cities. And the number of cities on the race to zero will be increasing. And this shows, I think, the scale of the contribution that cities can make to COP26, to what's happening here. And I think the points also that were made about top-down by states, but also the action is local, that is most relevant to mention also. So I think key question that is also being asked here in this COP26 is, okay, we have commitments, but how do we implement? And as soon as you mentioned the famous word implement, then comes the word finance, right? And I guess it's no accident that the previous session ended with that. So right now we're going to actually go in more depth to that, into that question. And we have a panel that is finely balanced, particularly once the EBRD president comes, because we essentially have two mayors, two cities, two important cities, and two presidents of development banks, right? And in that sense, in this balanced manner, we should have a very good element in terms of the demand for funds and the issues involved with improving access to finance. So this by way of a short introduction, and therefore may I turn then to Mr. Abdullah Al Basti, who is the Secretary General of the Executive Council of Dubai. And I turn to him first because I know that he has a train to catch, right? And therefore we are very pleased to turn to you for the first question. And the first question is that you are the C40 Vice Chair leading on the green finance team for the organization. And I understand that you have been doing some research and that the city of Dubai has undertaken with C40, quite a lot of work. And we would be very interested to learn what has been emerging, from that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As you know that the C40 is already doing a lot of work in this regard, and here I would like to thank Mark and his team for the amazing job. When we've started the project, we've decided to take a step back and to develop a comprehensive understanding of what the city needs to secure the green finance. With a proper benchmark with other cities and consultation, we found that the biggest challenge is to remain the financing adaptation measures. 5% of global climate finance is, and less than 2% of city climate finance is going to adaptation. This number needs to be multiplied by 4 or 5 times. Another challenge is access to finance by cities, and this is, I can summarize 4 points under this challenge. The first one is limited integration between departments. You need to sit with the finance guys, and you need to sit with the economy guys, and you need to sit with the other entities to give them and to to agree how to move forward in this regard. People, if we will not understand the needs of green finance, will not support you. This is normal things. Skills also is an issue. And we found out many cities struggle to secure a deal with the private sectors because of the lack of capabilities. Sometimes the government policy also restrict the movement of the cities. And the last one is we found out also many financial institutions do not have a product that serve the city needs. So cities need also to be closer to the private sector. However, the private sectors need to give more attention. I mean, when it's because you cannot compare city needs with the country needs. There is always a big difference between both. So with this, and I do believe that if we will share our experience and collectively between the C40 cities, we can do more. But as mentioned by Mayor Eric last time, he said that in the last 2 years, we spent $13 trillion to fight COVID, and we are not able to secure $100 billion for the climate change. That's the issue.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the results, of this. And I think some themes that are quite familiar, I guess, to all those that work in this area, right? I think you mentioned one, access to finance per se. You mentioned issues linked to capacity. You also mentioned issues related to organization, effectiveness. And in a way, you also provided at the end the perfect transition to the next question, right? And therefore, a question that I turn to Mayor Gallego from Phoenix to essentially ask at the level of a city with everything that has happened over the last year and a half, with huge impacts, on revenues of the city, with huge impacts also on expenditure, often unplanned, obviously, because nobody had planned, for this event. But just to get your view, particularly with the US, where there is such a discussion now about build back better, etc., your own feeling about how to integrate this element of green recovery, into, I would say, going forward, the implementation of what may emerge from COP26 for your city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For my city, Phoenix, transportation emissions are a huge portion of our emissions and how we think we have an opportunity to improve and to meet our 2030 goal. We are looking at a variety of different solutions. We're trying to make our city more walkable, which we knew walking and bicycling became much more popular in almost every city during COVID. How do we make sure we keep that and we build the infrastructure around it? So we've committed to 100 cool corridors where we're trying to put in shade and trees and make sure there's the safety improvements so people can walk and bicycle. We're also trying to triple our light rail system. That's been an exciting investment. It's creating very high wage jobs. I shared with some of my C40 colleagues that we had a gentleman who immigrated from East Africa to Phoenix. He was working at a hotel before COVID and is now making many times more building our transit system such that he was able to decide with his wife, they had enough money to start their family. And so he showed me a picture of his beautiful baby. So the job is also helping us with our recovery. And I hope we'll be able to move people permanently to higher wage jobs. Phoenix has a very large tourism industry. If you're looking to visit the United States, particularly in winter, nowhere better. Unfortunately, tourism was hit very hard during COVID-19 and many people have been displaced. The industry also shifted. People used to stay in very large hotels with full service staff. And we're seeing now Airbnb and other home rental services are very popular. We think some of that change may be permanent. And so those jobs in the large hotels may not come back. But can we help people move into building our transit system or electrifying our transportation? The region where I live is often called the Electric Valley in the United States because we have a large concentration of electric vehicle companies. They're actually having a hard time hiring right now. So we have to invest in the type of training so that we have the skill set for our residents to get those higher wage jobs. So all of those are some of the ways that we hope we can transition towards both a greener recovery and a more just recovery.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, in a way, bringing these two topics together. You started with the physical topic, infrastructure, transport, and then you had the second point on, I would say, the social aspect of the transition. And we know these two need to work, hand in hand to work, for us to get to the results. Thank you very much. So then may I turn to my neighbor, the president of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais, a major state in the major country of Brazil. I'm half Brazilian, so I'm trying to be neutral here. But I turn particularly to him because his bank works in a state that has many municipalities. If I remember correctly, 853, something like this. 853, see, I do listen to you. So 853 municipalities, and his bank is very involved in this. Now, the key benefit of having his presence today is really to ask the question about what the role of local banks, local public development banks in particular, can be in promoting urban climate finance, taking into account the two aspects that the mayor mentioned, both this infrastructure side and social aspect. So please enlighten us.
Thank you. Thank you, Josué. Such a pleasure to be here today, partaking in this panel. I feel privileged to share this special occasion with my colleagues here. The Development Bank of Minas Gerais is celebrating 60 years. It's a government-owned development finance institution that is dedicated to finance sustainable development projects and climate-related projects in the state of Minas Gerais. As a matter of fact, we just joined today the Green Bank Network as the first development bank in the world to be part of that very relevant initiative. We have a portfolio where the most part of it is dedicated to the private sector, SMEs, large companies in the agribusiness, in the industrial service sector, and a little bit of sustainable mining, especially related to mining that is dedicated to lithium, for instance, which is the base for car batteries and others. But we have roughly 10% of the portfolio that is dedicated to municipalities. As you said, 853 municipalities in a state that has 21 million inhabitants and is larger in size than Germany. So it could be a country in somewhere else in the world. We need to reach these municipalities, and they vary in size. We have one city that has more than 1 million inhabitants. Then we have a handful of cities that are roughly between 500,000 and 100 and a million. And then we have 80% of the municipalities with less than 20,000 inhabitants. So we have three different groups. The way we work is we have a project preparation facility for larger projects such as public lighting, water and sewage projects, roads that we will help structure for concessions to the private sector. And then we have credit. And within the credit that we offer, the finance, we have sustainable lines. And how we were able to streamline this process and able to achieve, more hundreds of municipalities. We designed and created a digital platform. So we've been servicing the 853 municipalities starting this year with call for projects. We establish a budget and we receive those projects in 4 different lines. And then we are able to streamline. They don't need to visit the bank. It's a development bank, so we don't have branches. They are able to submit the projects online. We are able to process them, filter, and then accept those that are bankable projects in a way that we can achieve every city in our state, which is a very large state, without much effort on their part. Bearing in mind that we're coming from a developing country, and most of these cities have a lower human development index than the average of Brazil, which is already a developing country. So it's a way to streamline and be able to mobilize climate finance projects, including from many multilaterals. We have climate finance on-lending programs with European Investment Bank, with CAF, with Inter-American Development Bank, with Fomplata, soon to be with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And also we have issued sustainable bonds in the New York Exchange. So we're trying to leverage sophisticated financial instruments, and we are able to use the platform of the bank to mobilize those resources to the last mile, to the very small villages of our good state of Minas Gerais.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being precise, because often in these discussions about access to finance, there is often a general answer that's given. So thank you very much for giving exactly even, how it works. So maybe, I don't know if there are any municipalities from Minas Gerais around, but otherwise we would give you, the website, right, on how to. You want to say something?
We have one municipality from Rio here. It's close by. We might try to do something together as the Secretary of Environment from Rio de Janeiro.
Thank you. So it's my great pleasure also to welcome Odile Rodon-Basso, the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So I think she has had a very tough schedule this afternoon, actually dealing with one of the issues that was raised in the previous panel, which was really about access, to finance for the global south, for emerging markets and developing economies. So I think the question that we would love to get, an understanding of is, I understand that the EBRD has created a specific program to develop the activities, in finance of green cities. And I think it would be in this moment of the COP26 where everybody is thinking about how to translate ideas, commitments into real projects and finance. Why is it that the EBRD decided to do this? And can you give us a bit of information about how it works? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josue, and thank you for inviting me to the panel and for the flexibility. I'm sorry, I was busy, but also they were late. No, indeed, the EBRD has launched a few years ago a program called Green City, and I think the logic, why did the bank, you know that much better than I do, but why the bank did that is, I think that first of all, start from the fact that 60% of the population lives in the cities. It will be growing, and the cities are emitters of 70% of CO2, and this also is increasing. And I think that so having action at the local level, at the cities level, appear to be absolutely key if we want to deliver and to be effective in what we are doing. One other element is also that at the city level, the proximity with the ground is much bigger, much more important. What you do can also have a direct impact on the citizen, on the health issue, health dimension. So this appeared also to be an important element. Why a green city program? Because we could do project by project, discuss with the cities, buses, a metro there, something for the district heating elsewhere. I think there the logic is was to say having a global and consistent approach would be much more effective for different reasons. First of all, it's a way to ensure that we have a prioritization and that we look at the global strategy of the city with the view of decarbonization, but looking at what is the more cost efficient, what should be dealt first, what is less important, and so forth. And also to have, this global strategic approach is a way, I think, to facilitate private sector financing and to facilitate the confidence of the citizen, because it takes time to draw up a plan. So there is a lot of work at the beginning in order to make an assessment of the situation, a diagnosis, and then to design the priorities, the list of action, and how they will be implemented. So it's a lot of work ahead. It's a bit heavy, but then when you have it, you know that it's consistent and it will deliver on the overall objective. So I think it's a guarantee for success when in the implementation phase. And it's also a way to build trust with the citizens, because I think that they have a clear roadmap. They know what the plan is, they know what is the intention, and then they can follow up on the implementation. And I think this is an element of transparency and of consistency. So we find that very helpful. This is very successful. We have, I think, more than 34 cities and 54 projects in 21 countries. So, it's mainly big cities. I heard the end of the previous intervention going in small villages. We are dealing with big or medium-sized cities, but I think that we are very proud of what we are doing, and we believe this is an efficient way. Then, then on the implementation phase, we have very different projects. We just financed clean buses in Tbilisi. We had a metro project in other cities, refitting of buildings elsewhere, and so forth. So it can be, for each city, we have a specific program developed by the city itself with our support. And I think that we are happy. We are trying to develop that and to go beyond with a total envelope of 3 billion.
Thank you very much. And I think, we are getting to the magical final 5 minutes. So I think what I will do in this situation is essentially to ask one of those magical questions with one answer, which is really to ask each of you if there is one lever that you would wish to have to improve the access to finance, what would it be? So obviously, again, we have this interesting panel composition in terms of what I would call the demand for finance and the supply of finance. So obviously, the question to those on the demand side is how, what would be the one measure you would hope, in terms of access to finance? And from the side of the supply is to ask, in terms of the articulation with the cities, what would be the one measure that would facilitate, the flow of resources from you? So maybe I'll do it physically. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Josué. It's always a pleasure to share panels like this, especially with people and cities that we know and we admire so much. And I also take the opportunity to wish Odile a great run at EBRD in her presidency. I believe that I don't think I'm on one side or the other. Actually, I think I'm in the middle. In the sense that I see the development bank as a platform to mobilize resources. When I say mobilize, is I issue bonds, and as I say, I use the digital platform to mobilize it at scale for a small, medium, and even large cities in my state. I'm bridging the gap. Whenever it's too costly for me because of my rating, I go for the multilateral development banks, the AAA banks, and see if I can do an on-lending program using their AAA, so their cost of capital, in order to offer a line or a financial instrument that is useful for the cities in terms of really transforming them and their urban planning into something that is more sustainable, climate mitigation or adaptation related. So this is the role that I see, and I think we should play at scale and look into practices from our peers and try to reproduce and adapt and share the knowledge.
I am looking forward to the day when green finance is more mature. From our perspective, the rules keep evolving. And so how the credit rating agencies look at sustainability has changed dramatically just since I was elected in 2019. We issued green debt at the height of COVID. And at the time, they wanted us to talk about the UN Sustainability Development Goals. We are one of only 5 American cities to do voluntary local review. And some of that is changing as well. I want to be able to recommend it to more mayors as a easy and fruitful tool. And so that I think that would make green finance more common.
For me, I think it's very important to bring all the stakeholders together to enhance the understanding of effective climate action. And also it's very important to be closer to the private sectors. Government, by cities by themselves, they cannot move in this, a project without having a full support from private sectors. That's it.
Thank you. For us, the ideal is to have a mayor and city administration that knows, that has a strategic vision and is really willing to tackle all the dimensions of the climate change. So transportation, buildings, wastewater, and so forth. So I think having a degree of ambition, the more ambitious the city is, the better it is for us. But also being willing to accept private sector financing, PPPs, and so forth, because I really believe with the level of investment that are needed, there are a lot of ways we can bring in private sector, and they have a lot of expertise, a lot of know-how, and it can be very effective. So I think for us, it's a 2-dimension.
So thank you very much. We've tried to give you some specific answers. It's not the answers to everything. And by the way, the scale of what we need to do, as you all know, is huge. But I think what's also fascinating is very much the point of linking, this point that was mentioned before about local action. And I think that particularly if we connect the points that you've raised in terms of mobilization of funds, in terms of systemic change in the financial sector, and in terms of private sector, and in terms of what you mentioned, having, cities that organize, and the point about capacity that you mentioned, these are the ingredients, of the scaling up that we're all looking for. So with this, thank you very much to members of the panel. Have a good trip back, I understand, and thank you for taking the time to come.
Great, thanks, Josue. Thanks, everyone. I thought it was a really great panel and really gets to the heart of what we need in order to turn those 1,000 cities race to zero commitments into immediate concrete action. It's interesting, when I look at the data in C40, you can see there's been a doubling of action across C40 cities in the last 6 years since the Paris Agreement. But when we look to what's in cities' plans for the next 9 years, it needs to treble in the next 3 years. So we've doubled in the past 6. We now need to treble in the next 3. You can hear on all the panels here, the political will to do that is absolutely there. And we've heard from 2 pioneering leaders of development banks that they're with us. We now need that pioneering attitude in the banking sector to become the norm. So thanks, everybody. It's been a small gathering here. We're limited for space, but over 130 people watching at home online. Thank you all for participating also. Very much look forward to taking this conversation forward. Thanks, everyone. The result of the, the research. No, I haven't seen it myself. I was just noting it.